Now, moving on to the General Rules and Procedures chapter, I have with me Alison McLaughlin, and I think Ivan's turning up to speak to the signs aspect of that chapter. Alison.
Marie Polisco as well for noise. So as you know, there's a number of different subsections for General Rules and Procedures. So there's been a few changes since the last draft was presented at the workshop. So the subsections of those concern are temporary activities, waterway setbacks, noise, and signage. So to start, perhaps, Marie?
It's just fun to get Ivan, so you continue.
So temporary activities, based on further discussions, made a very small modification to the rule for construction-related temporary buildings. So in the draft that you saw previously, those were allowed up to 50 meters squared for the duration of the project in the central city business and mixed use and in industrial areas. The issue was raised that the primary reason for having those controls were around the amenity effects in industrial areas. That's not as much of a concern. So I've added an exemption in areas like the port, the airport, heavy industrial areas, that as long as the buildings are set, have the normal building setbacks, we wouldn't restrict the amount of area that those temporary construction buildings could have. There were a couple small changes as well to the waterway setback rules. One was around the rural fencing rules. What we had in the previous draft, where fences were built across waterways, would have potentially required consent, but we've walked that back to if it's only 20% solid structure, then it wouldn't. So this would be more enabling in recognition of the different types of fencing that one would find in rural versus city environments. And there's been a small change as well to the assessment matters. They've been selected based on the different types of waterways and the different environments. What I've done is have another look at the public access matters of discretion and added them in the rural environment for some of the higher order waterways, so the downstream, upstream, and the larger lakes. So those are the changes for temporary activities and waterway setbacks. And I think Ivan can introduce some changes for signage.
Thank you, Alison. I do have a handout here which I just asked Marie to pass around because it's been a slight a very minor amendment, but I think our members need to be aware of it.
Is that reflected in what's up here?
No, Claire is going to need to just have I'll explain what this is about shortly when you get your papers. Perhaps just before, the starting point for this is the previous council briefing where it was pointed out to councillors that neither the Plan Change 84 nor the proposed replacement plan at that stage had provisions for signage on the airport. So the changes that we're coming to you with today are to do with that issue. It proposes to insert some provisions for signage on the special purpose airport zone. So the slight amendment, the handout which I've given you really relates to the rule where it's on the first page where the airport is highlighted. It refers to an internal road. That's the only change. So what we're talking about with this particular set of rules is that it relates to an internal road on the airport site. So what's happened, the table's been slightly reformatted because it sort of distinguishes it from those other above those other activities in the specific purpose zones. And just while I'm on that particular table, landfill, you just crossed that out. That's it's a very minor amendment. We won't be having a landfill specific purpose zone. It's actually being changed. That's the old Billboards landfill site. That's going to be an open space zone, as I think you probably know by now. Okay, so I mean, with that slight amendment and the amendments in front, that have come through, I'm happy to recommend these sets of provision for the airport and the section 32 as per the resolutions. On the understanding that, as Brigitte said before, we haven't had a chance to consult with the airport, so we would expect the airport to come back to us, but clearly there hasn't been had that time. And secondly, we haven't had time to do some proper modelling of these rules as well. But with those two caveats, I'm sort of more than happy to recommend to you that this goes off to the Minister. The Minister may well come back with comments, and the airport in due course may well as well. So, but this is our best professional shot at this, given the time we've had. What it really does, it introduces two sets of controls. One, just the areas we can have on the airport, specific airport zone. So that is the total maximum area per site. That's 18 square metres or 5% of the internal road frontage. And then the rest of the rules really are outside it. Well, they're basically dealing with billboards along the outer perimeter of the airport, and along Rustley Road, Johns Road, McLean's Island Road and Pound Road. So that's where the concerns were that were raised at a previous briefing. So we've limited to 3 sites around that perimeter. So that's under 3. I'll just take you quickly through them. The first one then, 18 square metres, that's the limit of the area of any site on an internal road within the airport. The content has to relate solely to activities within specific purpose zone. That should be not special or specific. And 6, unless they are permitted by 6831, which are permitted activities. So then we go on to billboards. So 2 aspects to this. They're going to be 10 metres back from the boundary with Memorial Avenue. So we've got a setback there from the signs along Memorial Avenue. Bearing in mind this is still part of the airport, so where Memorial Avenue goes from Rustley Road up to the roundabout. It is still an airport environment, but we're doing our best to try and retain that gateway that was raised before. And no more than 3 signs, excluding temporary signs, along those boundary roads with Rustley, Johns, McLean's, Jessop's and Pound. So that's quite restrictive, but I think it's looking at what there is now. I don't think it's unrealistic. But the airport may come back and have a different view, of course. All freestanding and billboard signs should be set back at least 8 metres from any adjoining zone boundary. And I think there may be a rural zone there. That rule could be redundant. It just needs to, but it's in there really as a safety net. Signs relating to any activity must be on the same site. So in other words, what this is trying to do is stop a particular company on the airport advertising along Rustley Road, for example. They've got to have the sign is restricted to on the same site, where the activity is.
About to go on Peter Leeming Drive.
Yes.
What sort of signage next to McDonald's? What sort of signage will that be allowed?
Well, that would be permitted to up to 18 square metres. But it won't be allowed to advertise along Rustley Road, Johns Road, or around the perimeter of the airport. So it'd have an on-site advertisement, or on-site sign only.
Have you got anything more to add there, Ivan, or are you wanting questions?
No, I've got nothing more to add. So hopefully,
probably not wanting questions, but are we up to questions?
Look, happy to take questions.
Any questions? Yeah, no.
Signs that are cropping up everywhere, like Ferrymead's a really good example, having a real adverse impact on our natural landscapes and amenity, poor, a negative impact on visibility, and so what can you just tell me, like, what we've got to protect against the proliferation, as we see in the last district plan, of those outdoor advertising signs? I mean, I know they have to get consent, but they always get consent, and it seems very seldom that we ever say no.
Okay. Well, there are two parts to this issue, Councillor. One on the airport site itself. The airport is an airport, so we've tried to limit the amount of restriction on the airport. In fact, we've put in that area limit, which is an extra restriction which is currently not in the plan. That won't stop the proliferation so much, but it being an airport, our view is that signage is, if it's contained within the internal parts of the operations of the airport, it's probably not going to really matter too much. But where we have taken your point on is around the edge of the airport, where we've put strict limits on that visual amenity and traffic safety. So under this particular rule, I don't think there could be any more signs along Pound Road because there's already one there, and there couldn't be any more along Rushley or Johns Road. Now, I think the airport may have some difficulty with that, but they are quite restrictive, and that's where, in our view, the visual amenity has the most impact, is where it's on the outside of the airport, where it interfaces with the rural area and along the main highway around Rushley Road, Johns Road. So that's where the emphasis of the rules are lying. They're lying on the edge of the airport and the interface with the surrounding environment, not internally.
Yeah, but when they just put these big outdoor signs up, that just detracts from the whole amenity.
Citywide.
So, I mean, it's citywide, but there's also the airport. Those big outdoor advertising signs.
Yep.
Like,
On the airport, yes, on the airport site itself, there are one or two large ones. I mean, I can think of one where the roundabout is, for example. Yeah, we haven't, apart from that area limit, which is 18 square metres, which is not very big. I mean, 18, it is almost the size of a house up high and 3 metres wide, but you wouldn't get that. It'd be probably more of a 4x4 or something like that. It probably wouldn't be out of place on the airport site. And I think we need to leave it to the airport company a little bit to see how it may affect the design of the terminal or that kind of thing. I'm not sure whether we want to go too far down that track in managing strictly the visual effects within the airport site itself, around the car parks and around the terminal. We've really steered away from that.
I'm a minority view, I think, on this. People don't care. People are just happy. What about the rest of the city then? Because
we came back.
Either? Okay.
We came back. I think last time we came back to you with an answer on that question around visual pollution. I think I recall where we've. I think there were two things. So I've only really came here prepared to put the amendments to the material that you've received in the mail recently.
All right, are we at a point where we can move these recommendations?
This is only for signs. No, we still have the rest of the chapter.
Oh, is there not a recommendation on the signs?
General rules.
There are specific recommendations on the signs and Alison.
Do you not have a recommendation on the signs?
Oh, yes, we
Or
do.
Do the whole thing?
But they're within the whole gamut of the chapter, so perhaps it's best that we
So pause that,
move
do
through
the rest of it, and then how many recommendations are at the end? Do you have just?
No,
five
there are.
We've got two for. Sorry, Brigitte. We've got two for signs. So we've got one which is moving the amendments, and the other one is for section 32. But they'll come up at the end.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll run through it then if there's no more questions and move on to the next aspect.
As I understand, the airport still haven't been notified of what the changes
No.
are. So when do you actually let them know?
I think we're talking about two things there. The decision on the spares is coming to you on the 26th of this month through the full council, because that's going through the normal RMA process.
Okay, sorry.
Yep.
Right. Do you want to box on?
Marie,
Okay.
so introduce some changes to the noise.
Yeah, I'm Marie Feliusco. I'm policy planner with the City Planning Unit. So the noise provisions, the noise rules, we have had heavy technical input into reviewing these noise rules, and they were found to be reasonable. So as a result, the overall approach was of the review is one of updating and fine-tuning the rules, not of a complete rewriting. The challenge here was to get all the rules from where they were sitting in different chapters into just this one general rule chapter. And so since you've seen the draft chapter last month, nothing much has change. I mean, the key changes are still there, but then the difference with this version that you've got is that just mostly on the formatting, the steps on how to use the rules were amended just to read better. Admittedly, it was a bit confusing. Then there was a permitted provision about the wind turbines. We've deleted that rule because it's covered already in the Chapter 11 utilities. And then, and also just a rearranging of some of the rules where they would sit, like in the location-specific noise standards, we have removed the Hagley Park, Victoria Square, and Cathedral Square from this table because it will now sit with the Central City chapter. The Ruapuna Motorsport Park used to be in the original last month's version was as an exception. We've now put it in as one of the location-specific sites, and the aircraft noise as well. The standards will be in the specific activities. Other than that, the proposed amendments will fall under the general blanket amendments, just for numbering and formatting. Yep, just for the noise.
Okay, so moving on.
So in terms of the recommendations for the resolution, there are a few minor amendments to what you were provided. One was around the referencing numbers for scheduled activities.
Can we scroll
If
up,
you just,
please?
yes, a little bit,
Keep going up.
past 4.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
After there.
That's that one there.
Yeah. The first one is around correcting referencing numbers on the maps for scheduled activities. The second one is for the Section 32 report on the water body setbacks. There's a few appendices that need to be added. So I've distributed those during the break. And this is basically just a schedule listing the changes to the waterways. So these are segments of waterways that have been added as a result of the review. Lakes and ponds, which will have setbacks for the first time, and the waterways on Banks Peninsula. And the next part of the appendix is a set of maps that show you the difference between the operative plan and the proposed plan in terms of the waterways. So you can see on here where sections of waterways have been added or removed as a result of the review.
So sorry, Alison, was what you're saying is what you handed out need to go into here.
Well, this is, yeah. Okay.
So there's no overall recommendation there that covers this?
It's B at Appendix 7.7, so,
Okay.
but it doesn't include the text of the appendix.
7.7.1. Should there be a 1 on there?
It's the whole Appendix 7.7.
Okay, thank you.
So it's to add the schedule Appendix 7.7, at Appendix 7.8, which is the explanation of the process for classifying water bodies on Banks Peninsula. And as part of that appendix, also the maps which show the differences. The next recommendation, there's a small error on the plan maps around the Waimakere River, which should be identified as a downstream waterway, as it is in the operative plan. Ivan had 2 recommendations for signage. So one was to add the provisions for signage in the special purpose airport zone to section 6.8.4.8 of the chapter, and make consequential amendments to the layout of the table, and also to insert the attached material for the signed subsection of the Section 32 report. And the last recommendation is to amend the draft chapter to include Appendix 6.6, landscaping and tree planting rules, which was distributed, but it was put in the Section 32 report instead of in the chapter. So it's just moving that from one thing that you could provide it into another.
But there's a little bit of duplication between this list and what's actually in giving the specific details, but that's okay. If you just scroll down again, please. Yes. So stop. Up. Up. No. Right. Just one screen down. No. Oh, sorry. Stop. And again, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. All I'm trying to show you is that that last list of recommendations is repeating what's actually in detail in the first few pages of the recommendation. So it's not new. The detail is in your package here that you had in front of you. Sorry? Yes,
tree
it
and
is there.
landscape.
If I could just,
Just one sentence on what were the changes will be fine. Ah, okay, so you're just shifting them around.
The landscaping and tree rules? Yeah, they were mistakenly put into the Section 32 report
okay.
instead of into the draft chapter, so we're just moving them into the other, into the chapter itself.
Do you want any other questions on the stuff in chapter 6?
yes, yes.
Okay, so sale of alcohol,
There you go.
page, oh, sorry, I don't have page numbers, but it's 6.9. Restricted discretionary activities. Sale of supply of alcohol between hours 11 and 7 a.m. from any site located within 75 metres of a residential zone. And I see you've excluded the central city mixed-use zone. So obviously the issue we have in Victoria Street is the proximity of the bars close to a residential neighbourhood. And really what it shows is that actually our rules aren't tough enough. I mean, it's too easy.
If I could just say, it's been excluded here because that goes into the Central City chapter. So I believe the intention for the Central City chapter is...
Is a standalone chapter, and that chapter, as I said before, will be coming to you, but it is delayed.
So is it, yeah, I mean, the frustration is all these bars are applying for consents now.
That's right, but that is not a matter that we can deal with in this chapter because it's in the Central City chapter. The Central City chapter is a standalone chapter. It has, in a sense, it's like a mini district plan within a district plan, and that's because it relates to the Central City Recovery Plan. So all of these issues is what you need to raise when we deal with that chapter.
So if we chose to do anything in the Central City, so we don't have a single rule in our district plan that relates to the Central City now?
Well, we will,
That's
yes.
true.
That whole chapter deals with all of the Central City rules. None of these chapters that are going through today deal with the Central City because the Central City chapter has rules specifically pertaining to that area only. Council rules and Sarah rules.
Like, there must be things in our district plan that affect the Central City that aren't specific to the Central City but are kind of general across.
No. Everything that will affect the Central City, including all of these general rules and procedures, are in the Central City chapter. It's a standalone chapter.
So there'll be a section of...
It'll be a big chapter.
And, yes, and the recovery plan.
Well, is there any reason why we can't do this now?
Yes, because it's not actually in this chapter. What you're asking for comes through to you on the Central City chapter, and no, we can't do the Central City chapter because you haven't seen it yet.
Look, I don't know if this applies here, but in terms of signs and sale of alcohol, like some signs, and Ivan will be familiar with the one along Centurus Road, we get a compulsory stop sign was actually about selling booze. And so is there a way of actually like, I guess ensuring that signs around alcohol are appropriate? Do you know the one I mean, Ivan?
Yeah, that's on the roadside, is it?
There's road shops, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's more of a bylaw issue, councillor. I don't. It's on a private public land.
Oh no, it won't be on public land, I think.
Oh, I'm not sure the one. I'm not sure the one
well,
you mean in that case.
That's that compulsory stop sign by the quick liquor.
It's on, but it's in the block of shops. It's a bottle store. The guys love it.
Oh, yes, I know
Very
what you mean.
professional.
Yeah.
It's a very professionally run bottle store. There's no
Yes.
question about that. But it's just the amenity of the sign, I think, Phil.
I'd have to go and have a look.
He's got
No, but I can't actually picture it.
he's got some good specials.
Yeah, they're covered. Well, if they in a commercial zone, which they would be covered by the sign provisions which apply to the commercial zone. As far as content goes, yeah, that's always been an issue. I don't know if I can really comment on that without sort of having a little more think about that. But
all right.
We don't really. There are content issues around.
It's more of a content issue on the
Yes.
sign.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Thanks, Ivan.
Yeah.
Aye.
Carried.
Thank you.
That was